Hello everyone, today is this Belkin RT3200 router. Before I start that, I will say also thank you to anyone who does actually subscribe to this channel. The content I create isn't really very episodic, and so it's quite an achievement to have got to 10,000 subscribers. So thank you for those who do subscribe. For those that have just found this because they've Googled or searched for this device, welcome. I make videos about random stuff, so you can subscribe if you want, but it's very unlikely that I'll make another video that you like. But subscribers do really make me feel valued and are helpful for the Google metrics or the YouTube metrics. So this router is Wi-Fi 6. It's also made under the Linksys name, and I think the Linksys one has a black outer shell, otherwise probably very similar design. This is what's in the box, what the box looks like, not very exciting. What's on the back of the box. Side of the box, underside of the box, which has all the serial numbers and the MAC address and other things you might want to know, technical. Let's get into it. What this video is going to show is pretty much what you've seen on the box. What the machine looks like, what connectors there are, what buttons there are, what lights there are, and also it will go on to a video about the web interface, so the admin interface of this router, and what that looks like and where you find all the various settings. This box is just an outer sleeve for a more substantial box. So there you go, that's just the sleeve. Leave that over there. And then a more substantial, just plain box. Inside the box, put this away and get my cup of tea. Inside the box we've got a network cable. Annoyingly, it's quite a short network cable. A European and a UK end power plug. Shouldn't have put that screwdriver away. So, European end. And British or UK power plug. Rather difficult to get out of the box without bending the cardboard. Power supply, which is 12 volts and 2 amps, brackets, or 24 watts otherwise. That slides on and clips in. To undo this is quite difficult, you need quite a lot of pressure on that, and then that will slide off again. But the idea is, unless you're moving countries, you shouldn't have to change that really. That's what the end of the power socket or connector looks like. And then we get onto the router. There is a manual. Some people watch these videos for the manuals, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to really quickly scan this across the camera. If there's something you want to read on it, you'll need to pause the video to read it. So let me see if I can zoom in, or not zoom in, focus in on that. So yeah, if there's anything you want to read, just pause the video please. Interesting. Didn't notice that, but they've put a sticker in the manual of the Wi-Fi name and password. It's got the support contact numbers, and if you've changed the settings you can write them there. The other side looks like we've got different languages, and the same on there. There's all different languages, so I'm not going to show you those because you've seen the English one already. Now, the router itself. Oh, comes with a CD. Not sure I've even got... Oh, it's just the documentation, so it's probably more information than what's on that leaflet. I suspect you can download all of that as well. I don't even think I've got a machine with a DVD or a CD drive anymore. And here we are. We have the Belkin branded router. Embossed Belkin logo here. On the back we've got WPS button here, blue button or mauve button, red or purplish, or no, sorry, pinkish red reset button, 4 gigabit Ethernet ports, 1 gigabit WAN port, a USB socket, the power connector, and quite a nice toggle power switch. On the other side, just another embossed Belkin logo. On the top, quite a lot of ventilation. On the underside, we do have the model number and the make of it, 12 volts 2 amps wording, the wireless details and the WPS PIN, serial number and the MAC address. On the front of it, we've got quite a nice design. It reminds me of a really old, in the UK there was a company called NTL and also Telewest, which then got gobbled up by Virgin Media. It reminds me of their modems, their cable modems. I think they were Motorola's, which looked quite like this. We have, like with a lot of stuff, a bit of plastic protecting the this front bit. Let's see whether I can peel that off. There we go. We have that. I will plug the router in and we can watch it start up. What I do have here as well, I'll focus down on that, is the power being consumed on an extension cord in my office. However, not really sure how, other than maybe a neon indicator in the distribution block. It seems to think that when idle or doing nothing, we are using 1 watt of power all the time. So just keep that in mind. Let's plug this in to the back there, and I'll plug it into the mains. So we've gone up to 3.26 watts and it's booting up. Nearly 5 watts. Nearly 5.5. So while booting, it's 5.5 watts, and we'll see what it does once it's started up. I'll also get a cable for it to be connected to the internet. I'll wait for that to finish starting. So the other nice thing you can do with these is they support they support OpenWRT, which is a different routing platform. Well, I'll have to time that how long it started, but I know that OpenWRT on these routers takes 26 seconds from when you switch it on to when it's ready and is routing traffic, which is pretty impressive for a router boot up time. I'm pretty sure that the Belkin's built-in firmware, stock firmware just there, took longer than that. So now the wireless will have started up and it's all in a ready state. It's using about 7 watts of energy constantly. I'll plug it into the internet and see whether that makes any difference to how much energy it uses. So that's going to go into the internet port and see whether I can stand that up there. I'm not sure whether I need to run through the welcome wizard. No, it seems to work straight away. So we've gone up to nearly 8 watts of energy. Now it has access to the internet, and then it's gone back down. So it's probably doing stuff like software updates or some other things which use energy. So there we go. That is the physical part of this router. The next thing you'll see will be a video capture of my screen on a laptop going through the web interface of this, so the admin pages of it, where you change all of the settings like DHCP, the IP address of it, the wireless details, and other things like that. So stick around for that if you want. There will probably be a link in the video description for how you put OpenWRT, which is custom firmware, onto this router, and hopefully that'll be helpful to somebody as well. Before we move on to the next section, if this video has been helpful to you already, it would be really helpful to me if you wouldn't mind subscribing to my YouTube channel. You don't need to have the video notifications switched on, but the subscriber numbers, as I say at the beginning of the video, they really do help, and 10,000 for a channel where there's no ongoing episodes is pretty good, so thanks for those of you who have subscribed. see you in the next section. Okay, so we're on to the screen recording part of the video, which is going to be the admin interface of this router. The default IP address is 192.168.1.1, and press enter. You will get to a logon screen, and it will automatically move on to the next step without asking you for the password. If you get asked for a password, then somebody's probably run through this wizard before, and you need to ask whoever set the password, or do the factory reset on the router to get around that. So you need to select how I've read and accept the terms, and then click on next. You can also click cancel out of this and get directly to the web interface, but for the purpose of this video I'm going to go through as much of the web interface as I can, so we're going to see what the wizard does. It asks you to name your network, which is a bit strange because why bother having defaults with a label on the underside of the router, but let's do this. My network, my password, my network. Do I want it to be the same? Yes, because I don't really want to split the 5 GHz and the 2.4. Some people might want to. I'd recommend using the same password for both the 5 GHz and the 2.4 GHz, especially if you're going to keep them the same name. Otherwise it will get very confusing. If you're having different names, you could potentially have different passwords without it being such a problem. Asks you to set a password for the admin of the router. And that will set and change the settings on the router. To which I'd say that's taking a disappointing amount of time. I would have expected it to have been done by now. Okay, we've now moved on to the next step. Register the product. No. I guess you could get maybe an email if they release a firmware update or something, but I'm definitely going to skip that step. Choose automatic updates or not. I'm going to switch those off for the moment. So my one came shipped with firmware 1.0.01, and let's see if there is any newer firmware update. No, that's the latest firmware that it came shipped with, is the latest firmware that's available. Okay, all finished. And we can go done, and it's logged me out, which is a bit strange, but okay. Log back in, and we're on the status page of the router. So we've got the firmware version, the date and time that it thinks it is, which is definitely very wrong, which I'm not sure how it's managed to get such an inaccurate date and time. I'll have a look at the settings for network time later. And it's detected a DHCP internet connection, which is what it's plugged into on my side here. It's also got an IPv6 address because my network has IPv6, and there's a refresh button at the bottom. So we're on system status onto router. Let's go to Local Network, which shows the LAN IP address, and the DHCP server is on and what IPs it's giving out. If I go DHCP client table, you should see one entry in that list, which will be the laptop that I'm recording this video on. Clicking on wireless network, you can see the two networks, and frustratingly it doesn't tell you what channel it's on. It says that it's automatic, but it doesn't actually say what it's picked, which is I'd say unusual. Ports, that's pretty interesting. So it can tell you that we have something plugged into the internet port, which is a green dot, and also that the computer I'm using is plugged into port number 3. Not sure it tells you what speed you're getting. Yeah, so the device I plugged in was definitely a 100 megabit capable device, but the router's web admin interface cannot tell you whether the thing that is connected at a gigabit or 100 megabit, which can be a bit frustrating if you're trying to remotely figure out why something might be performing slower than you'd expect. So that's the system status part of the web interface. Let's go to the configuration part. It starts with connectivity and local network, and that's where you set the router's LAN IP and subnet mask. So if I set 10.0.50.1, will it let me set, wow, okay, so the router's stock firmware doesn't allow you to set a subnet wider or larger than a /24 or 255.255.255.0. So if you're using, for example, a 10 dot something or other IP range, and you're going across, for example, 10.0.0.1 all the way through to 10.0.1.254, this router with its stock firmware cannot cope with that. You cannot configure that, which is a bit frustrating, I'd say. Scrolling down to the DHCP server part, you can set the start address, how many IPs it will hand out after that start address, and I guess if you set static DNS, you can set that or point that to, for example, your Active Directory domain controller in your network, or a what's the Raspberry Pi thing that blocks stuff. So yes, you can point that to your own DNS server within your network, or I guess you could also put in instead OpenDNS or 1.1.1.1 or something similar. DHCP reservations will be where you fill in a MAC address and it will sign you out for no reason. Interesting. Let's try that again. Ha, strange. Right, DHCP reservations will be where you fill in a MAC address, and it will always give out that same IP address to that MAC address, which might be useful for CCTV cameras or printers and other things you might always want to have the same IP address. Moving on to WAN setup. In my instance, it's just a DHCP configuration or DHCP network. You can set static IP addresses, PPPoE, which if you're in the UK will be what most providers will use. So you'll fill in PPP details, and you can set the MTU. Well, I say that, can you? Oh, I see, auto, manual. Can't set a 1500 MTU though, it's a bit strange. PPTP, so that's interesting that could potentially do, this router could be a VPN router. Not sure whether you'd need, oh yeah, okay, so you've got obtain IP address automatically, so it could be a VPN router if your main internet provision is just DHCP, and then after it's DHCP'd or static IP'd, it would then try and connect to the PPTP server, and I presume the same will also happen for L2TP. Possibly, although it doesn't give you any information or any configuration for the WAN side, so maybe it can only do DHCP for the WAN, and then it will try and connect to the L2TP. Bridge mode would be useful if you're just going to use it for an access point, probably. And we have wireless bridge, which I wonder if that makes it into, yeah, so that's wireless bridge, not wireless routing. So say, I'd have to give this a go. Maybe there'll be another video in the description about this, but I'm guessing that wireless bridge should allow you to plug this route or configure it in wireless bridge mode with your Wi-Fi details for your existing network, and then plug the Belkin router into, for example, a games console or some other device that might not have wireless or has broken wireless, and use it as a console through the network cable to the Belkin, and then Belkin over Wi-Fi to the rest of your network, is how I would expect that to work. We can do VLANs, which is quite interesting. Tagged data out on some of the ports. So you can only do VLANs on the WAN port and the 2 upper ports, so ports 3 and 4. Very interesting and unusual for a router to support that. Into IPv6 setup, we can do automatic or not automatic. If you undo automatic, some stuff that I'm afraid I have no idea what a 6RD tunnel is. I can't even attempt to explain that. MAC address cloning is quite convenient if your internet provider locks down your internet port by MAC address. You can tell the router to mimic the MAC address of your original router, so you don't have to ring up your ISP and ask them to whitelist or allow list your Belkin router. Advanced routing will be to do presumably with setting static routes. So you can turn off or on NAT, which is network address translation. There's very few reasons you'd want to turn that off unless you've got a static IP range and you know what you're doing. Static routing means you could say send data for 10.0.0, subnet mask 255.255, and I'm going to send that to a different gateway of 1.200. That would pass it on to a router, if I had one, sitting on 192.168.1.200, to send it on to the 10.0.0 range, rather than sending it out of the WAN port. Onto the Wi-Fi settings, we've got the 5 GHz settings for network mode and 2.4, so basically those are going to be mirrored. So I'm just going to do the 5 GHz settings down there. The name of the network, the channel width, and it only goes up to 80 megahertz, sorry, 40, interesting. So the 5 GHz radio only goes up to 40 GHz channel width, which is, I'd say, subpar compared to other routers. Interesting. So I would say if you've got a gigabit Ethernet or a gigabit internet, you would really want 80 megahertz width channels on the 5 GHz Wi-Fi. Interesting that you are unable to set that. And also on the 2.4, it looks like you can't set anything higher than 20 megahertz, which is really bizarre. WPS, which is the button on the back of the router, and using the device pin, that's where you change those settings, quite often used for printers and other things that don't have any way to type in a password. Wireless security is where you'd set the password. Interestingly, it supports WPA3, which is quite good. Guest wireless, so we can add guests. Weirdly, you can't change the name, so you're stuck with whatever your normal name is and then -guest, and have a maximum of 20 people, so 10 people on the 5 GHz and 10 people on the 2.4 GHz, if you wanted to. And that's really strange. You've got it seems to do it in a really bizarre way, where it says the guest should connect to your wireless and then open a web browser and entering the guest password. Which doesn't make sense. Why they wouldn't just set it as a WPA key or password. Very strange. Wireless MAC filtering is pretty useless these days because it's pretty trivial to spoof a MAC address, so don't use this MAC filtering for wireless. If somebody's connected to your Wi-Fi that you don't want them to be, you're far better off changing the password on your wireless and changing all your devices, because it's so trivial to get around MAC address filtering on wireless. We can have beamforming and multi-user, multiple in, multiple out, or MU-MIMO, which you can turn off and on. Security, we've got firewall where you can turn on and off WAN Ping. So generally, I think you should always enable WAN Ping because it's very useful for monitoring the stability of your internet. So I would always untick filter anonymous internet requests, which is otherwise known as WAN Ping. DMZ is effectively port forwarding every single port on your router through to another device. So it's the same as, well, essentially it's like bridge mode, but not being in bridge mode. So, pardon me. It's essentially like bridge mode, but without actually being in bridge mode. So everything else can still use the internet, but any data that hits your router is going to get forwarded to the IP address you select here on the network. If you're looking at using DMZ, I would strongly recommend figuring out instead which specific ports you want to port forward rather than using DMZ. Got dynamic DNS, which supports dyndns.org, which is not free, and also luckily supports noip.com, which is still free. VPN pass-through options, which will be probably what's called helpers or something, which help VPNs of these types work through the router. IPv6 firewalling, which is also very useful. Quality of service. So let's give this a test. Right now, in its default settings, to a server that can do a gigabit on the or through its WAN, we are getting pretty much a gigabit of 950-ish megabit per second, minus the overhead. Plus the overheads would be a gigabit. Let's see whether this QoS works in the way that I expect. Internet access priority. Manual. 500 megabits per second. Save. Cool. That takes a very long time to apply that setting. It's done. Right, let's try that again, see whether that makes any difference to how it works. Okay, so interestingly, even though I've applied upstream bandwidth, which I would have thought would be upload, but it's I guess upstream means the connection that is further beyond your router, and indeed that's limited it to 500 megabits per second. So if you find that, for example, if you're downloading a game on Steam and your internet goes absolutely laggy and packet lossy, you should take, or in here, the upstream bandwidth you should set to slightly below your internet connection's speed, so that there's always, you're not saturating your line. I'm not a fan of how long that takes to actually apply that. I'm not really sure why it should take so long. Okay, moving on to single port forwarding. Let's do this. I want to port forward, well, it's giving you some templates. Literally just fills in a couple of boxes for you, which saves a bit of time. TCP, and we'll send that through to IP address 95, enabled, apply. So that's how you add a single port forward. So adding a port forwarding range, if you have a game or something which needs you to port forward a lot of stuff, so I'm going to do Half-Life 2. Wow, I can't have spaces in the names. 27500 through to 27600, for example, on UDP to go through to that computer, and apply and save. There we go, port range triggering. I've never really figured out what this range triggering or port triggering is about. I think it might be that if an inbound connection or an outbound connection is attempted on a port, it then forwards the inbound ports to that computer or something. So possibly you could have, if it makes a connection out on 2700 or something, that it would then forward ports 6000 to 8000 through to a particular computer. I think is maybe what that's about. I've never used it, I've never seen it used, so I'm not really sure. So, external storage presumably is what the USB port is for. So you can plug in a USB drive and use it to access the storage. Let me see if I can do this. I'm going to see how it works. Okay, so I've plugged in a USB disk and it still says connect the storage device to the appropriate port on the back of the router. Refresh. So the disk is definitely spun up. I can hear it's over there making noise, but definitely not working. So I'm going to say that is something I'm not going to be able to go through there. How very strange. So moving on to the other options that we probably can't get to or use much of. Okay, you can expose the information on the drive to the internet as well using FTP, and add accounts. Onto administration, we've got the language of the web interface, the password to access the web admin interface, the time zone, which starts off in America. Let's move that to England and automatically adjust for daylight savings. Moving on to management, access via HTTP and HTTPS on the LAN, and you can also, it looks like, turn off access through people who are connected wirelessly. So if you've got a router that is in, for example, a Airbnb or a guest house, and it's in a cupboard where people can't get to it, and the only access they've got is through Wi-Fi, then you can stop them trying to get to your admin interface if you wanted to there. You can also enable remote access and lock it down to a range, a single continuous range of IP addresses. Gateway function, you can turn off and on the SIP, which is for VoIP, ALG, Application Layer Gateway, turn off and on Universal Plug and Play, which is a system which allows programs and devices and game consoles on your network to automatically port forward for you. So some people love that because it makes things easy. Other people think it's a security risk because devices and software can set up port forwards into your network without you knowing. I'm not really sure what allow users to configure does. You normally probably wouldn't want this allow users to disable internet access. That would mean that your Windows computer, you can go into the network section, find the router and tell the router to disconnect from the internet without having to log on to the web interface. You've got backup and restore settings, which gives you a binary file. So it's not plain text, you can't just extract information from it. Device reset is where you can factory or restart the router if you wanted, but also factory reset all the settings on the router using the web interface. And then the firmware upgrade screen where you can give it a firmware file or tell it to check online for updates. Moving on to parental controls, let's see how well this works. We want to restrict access to this computer, and I want to block, for example, bbc.co.uk, and let's do also bbc.co.uk. On the parental controls screen, just be aware that the schedule for never, always, or between specific times is not about blocking specific sites over those specific times. It's about blocking all internet access, no matter what you've got down in this box here. So if you wanted to block Facebook overall all the time, you'd fill it in here. and then you could allow access to the internet except for Facebook on the times shown on this screen. If you wanted to always block internet access to one of these devices, you'd select always, and it ignores the details in the block specific sites. If you wanted to allow all the internet all the time, allow most of the internet all of the time, select block internet access or never, but then you do fill in block specific websites, and it will block those websites. So just a little bit confusing. I thought you would select always and then fill in the specific websites you wanted to block, but in fact that blocks all of the internet access all of the time. In troubleshooting, you've got logs to do with, I'm not really sure what the outgoing or the incoming log is. It doesn't really seem to match anything that I'd expect to see, but that's what they look like. And you've then got a security log to do with who's logged in and change settings on the router, and DHCP client log about which devices have what IP address. Diagnostics, you can do pings and trace routes directly from the router. So if one of your machines can't get to, for example, PayPal, you can do a ping from the computer and see where or a trace route from the computer and see where it ends. And you could also do a trace route from the router and see where that ends and figure out whether it's the computer's issue or your ISP's or your router's issue. The only thing I haven't found so far on this whole web interface is the time settings. So, okay, well, it has fixed itself because it was saying that it was, I think, the year 2020, but it did take quite a while before it picked up on the correct date and time. And I'm not really sure, it doesn't look like they expose any settings on there for setting the date and time. So if the date and time's wrong on your router, not really sure where or how you can set that. You can set the time zone, but that doesn't set the date and time. So they must be using their own NTP server or a network time server that you can't change. So yeah, hopefully that video has been helpful to you. If it has, it would be really helpful to me if you wouldn't mind subscribing to my YouTube channel. You don't need to have the video notifications switched on, but the subscriber numbers really do help. There'll also be in the description of this video several other videos. So there'll be one about how you install OpenWRT, which is some custom firmware for this router. There'll also be another video on how to factory reset this router if you've locked yourself out by setting an admin password that you don't know, or you for some reason just want to go back to the settings from when you took it out of the box when you bought it. Yeah, thank you very much for watching.